as we advance the conversation, as we move from embassies and protocols, I want to introduce you all to another important voice coming out of Latin America. We actually met in Cali, Colombia last year where we were launching ISM. And so this is one of those voices that's really shaping the future on the ground in Latin America. And so Valeria Soler is a connector. She's a builder and leader working at the intersection of youth, women, and technology in Latin America. She has dedicated her career to really ensuring that the future of AI is not only innovative, but also inclusive and deeply human-centered. Valeria leads two groundbreaking initiatives in Colombia. One is Women in AI, where she helped launch the first South American chapter, and Young AI Leaders Bogotá, a UN-backed hub that empowers youth to really apply AI in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. So through these platforms, she has created vital spaces for young people and women to not only enter the conversation around technology, but to lead it, bringing brilliant and fresh perspectives, really bold ideas and values that are really rooted in equity and care. Her work bridges policy, academia, and innovation, really connecting government leaders with deep tech startups, also with grassroots communities. She is also an artist, a podcaster, as well as a facilitator, weaving creativity into everything she does. And in her keynote, Valeria will highlight how Latin American youth and women are shaping compassionate ways of moving forward in AI. So, and this will ensure that the next wave of innovation reflects not only technical excellence, but also social responsibility, empathy, and justice. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Valeria Soler.
Wow, Marcus, what a wonderful introduction. I'm moved. Thank you for your kind words. It helps to put a little bit of perspective into what I do every day because it's a little bit less intelligible than what you expressed, but it's spot on.
That's the complexity, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the space and for creating a Latin America segment on this important agenda. That doesn't happen that often in the international spaces that I've been in around technology. Usually Latin America is the last on the table, and if there's somebody, maybe it's just the one person, and it's like a really fringe perspective that barely gets any voice or recognition. So I'm trying to change that in any way that I can, and this is a step towards that. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen because I have a little presentation prepared. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see it perfectly fine. You're good.
Okay. So actually, just before this, I was giving a talk in a public university outside of Bogota with high school students and university students. So it's right now extremely fresh within me to be around the youth, be part of the youth, really feel with it, and connecting with the territories and how that looks like in the ground. And I was so pleasantly surprised, honestly. So that presentation, we started off by doing an icebreaker, which was called Your Future, Your Prompt, whereby I asked participants, like, hey, if you could prompt an AI, to solve the greatest challenges of our country, what would you ask it to do? And this young man stood up and he, not only came to the front of the stage with me to talk, he gave a little, like, I don't know, crash course and basically told us the biggest challenge we have in Colombia to adopting and scaling AI solutions. And it's our data that we don't have a good like data room or data governance, we don't have the protocols. We really need to like kind of begin from scratch oftentimes. And this was like, I don't know, like a 17-year-old telling me this. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I, and it really speaks about how the youth is approaching this. Because, there's this like, distance because none of this is being created in your territory, but there's still, you're using it every day, you're consuming its content, you see it everywhere in social media. So there's this evolving notion of ownership and wanting to have leadership and a voice in these times of exponential change. We are really not naive at all as to like what's going on. And basically we're trying to find our place in it all. What can we do? Where can we innovate? How can we use AI for the betterment of society? And also, how can we do that while dealing with our mental health issues, with our addiction to the platforms? So this has been really connecting me towards a grander mission that I feel quite near to my heart, which has to do mainly with three things. The first one is to awaken collective imagination and agency, because here we tend to react to all the technological revolutions very, I don't know, like very reactionary. Like, oh, well, this happened. Now we need to like see what we can do about it and adapt. We're always falling behind. We're always, trying to play catch up game. And with AI, it's like, okay, so we all have access to this technology. We can see what Europe is doing, what the US is doing, what Asia, what Africa is doing. How can we propose something a little bit more different, a bit more grounded into our needs and into our vision, into our culture? And that's a part of like collective imagination. There's this topic of techno diversity that I've been fascinated with. And basically, Silicon Valley and the global north, they've been really good at not only creating these technologies and transporting them everywhere else around the world, but also in shaping the way we relate to technology and how we can imagine its future. And technodiversity speaks more of like, okay, no, but how did Chinese culture perceive technology before? What values did it shape? And maybe what have we left behind? Because our discourse has become so homogeneous that we're all starting to think the exact same. So sometimes you like open the space for Latin America to participate, and honestly, nothing really different or novel is shared because we're trying to play also the imitation game. So getting like outside of the matrix of like what the rest of the world has been thinking and us wanting to propose something new is not that easy because we see like there's like a model of like doing things and making that fit into the world. And then there's the part of agency, which is having the locus of power and realizing that you do have a say in how things happen and how things get done, that like you're not a victim of circumstance. And the third part is a dimension of purpose and responsibility to Earth's greatest challenges. So what I've noticed is that SDGs and in general like climate change and all these metrics that we use to measure the planetary well-being, they're really not doing well. And you have the brightest minds in, I don't know, Harvard and MIT and Cambridge and all these amazing universities, but the needle isn't moving fast enough. And not even COVID could move the needle significantly either. So I think, like Waki was saying, it's not only about the technology, it's also about the people. And I don't think there's enough people seriously taking on these planetary challenges. And based upon that, I have a hypothesis. So when you appropriate, like you take into your responsibility an issue of society, there's so many to pick from, it's really go and pick your own adventure. but selecting that and appropriating it gives you a sense of purpose, mission, and life vision, which is actually related to the anomic feeling that a lot of young people have right now, the sense of disconnection from their communities, isolation, and anxiety and depression. So I actually see a bridge to, connect with a greater sense of responsibility and purpose to bridge these like side effects and negative issues of how we've been relating to technology and our communities. Because I believe that deep down, we really do come to contribute to something greater than ourselves. And that's not a privilege. Like sometimes, you work and you are like, I just have to do this job. I need to pay these bills. Like that's just what I got to do. But we're wasting so much human capital, so much intelligence, and so much energy on things that are not very consequential to our perpetuation of existence on this planet. So in today's talk, my message was like, guys, we need to stop wasting time and realize that it's our moment. It's our moment to take action, to take responsibility, and to contribute to something greater for problems we didn't really create or are responsible for, but we will be dealing with the consequences, and no one wants that. And I do all of this. Same as with women in AI, I'm a woman and young, and I feel like I really had to fight a bit for my place in the world and to be taken seriously. So women in AI kind of helped me to gain that confidence and that space in the field here in Colombia. And also the Young AI Leaders Initiative, it's because I am young, I'm Gen Z, and I know that being young in this day and age really isn't easy. Some statistics for Latin America that I'm quite concerned about is that 15% of our youth, ages 10 to 19, live with a diagnosed mental disorder. That's about 16 million young people. There's more than 10 daily suicides among adolescents. And this combines to a lost economic contribution of $30.6 billion a year. So, in us dealing with the challenges of this future that is so uncertain, job displacement, you really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The greatest cure for me has been community, to understand that I'm not going through those anxieties alone and that talking about it and gathering others around these issues can be extremely helpful in getting back that locus of power into ourselves. So, Women in AI is an international organization with presence in more than 150 countries. And I met the global ambassador at AI for Good last year. And she was telling me, like, yeah, we're in 150 countries. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a lot of countries. Like, that's really a significant number of countries. They must have a chapter in Colombia. And surprisingly, they didn't. And actually, they didn't have a chapter anywhere else in South America. So that really showed me like this how Latin America is in the global AI development sphere. Like we're really the last ones on the table. So for me, opening the chapter was like a no-brainer because like, okay, no, we really should have one. I know plenty of women in AI. I mean, this makes sense. And today we're more than 4,000 women around Colombia with local chapters in Antioquia, Norte de Santander, Bucaramanga, and the Coffee region. And later on came an initiative by AI for Good from ITU, which is the Young AI Leaders Program. So the Young AI Leaders Program in Bogota, you have a team of 13 young people from very diverse backgrounds. We have a team of like 5 mentors, and among those will be Pico, who will be speaking after me. And we are a community that's interconnected globally. We're 103 hubs in more than 50 countries. And I thought it's fascinating that this segment is focused on Latin America because I've been very focused on Latin America with this community. We even created a coalition. We also included the San Francisco hub because it's a strategic and the hub leader is Argentinian. But every day I talk with the Mexico City hub leader, Buenos Aires, Mérida, San Francisco, and we're all working together to see how we can open up opportunities for our region. Because, this is the only like regional coalition that exists for this Young AI Leaders program. And it's because we really understand the urgency in creating opportunities for our region. We understand that we're the last ones to the table, we're comparing ourselves to the rest of the world, and we're not feeling good about what we're seeing. So there's like literally like fire under our ass to like move, to get opportunities, to hustle. So you will see us in that group as one of the most active participants. And for us, we understand the opportunity and the risk because AI is definitely the greatest transformation opportunity of our generation and potentially the next three ones to come. Because we can see its potential to solve real problems. I think we're still bridging on like how it was mentioned previously to actually see the outcomes of that. And with the Young AI Leaders Initiative being kind of place-based, it forces you to solve local, but to think global. Because when you solve local, you're close to the issues, you're close to the stakeholders, you're close to the problem. And when you think global, you understand that that issue is not isolated to your region, to only your region. The solution that you derive from it could be escalated and tested around the world as well. And there's certain risks and certain things that are affecting or that we're really questioning ourselves with. And it's one of the reasons I feel like we had a good chemistry with Marcus because I never thought that my 2 years in high school of going deep into anthropology would be relevant in the field of technology. And guess what? I was wrong. It's been extremely useful and it's super key. And one of those ways that it's become really relevant to have that background in the social sciences is to understand the power dimension of this, to understand how this is affecting the social fabric, how it's affecting the way we relate to each other and to ourselves. And there's this word that I recently learned in AI for Good, which was enmeshment of AI and your emotional, like using AI as an emotional therapist. And it's like, wow, we're letting this like LLM tell us what to do and what to think and how to deal with our issues when it's literally a prediction of words and we take it at face value. And it's affecting how we feel in our own lives, in our own personal relationships, in our own moments of solitude. So there's a lot of things that are going on. And it's important to understand that dimension of that it's like place based. And before I move on to this one, there's this book that I'm reading right now. It's called Creating from Here. And it talks about one of the most important startups in Latin America, which is Platzi. And basically, the book is like, okay, we might not be the biggest startup out there, but we've had relative levels of success in the region, and we're staying in the region. So they compare how creating startups and the philosophy and the recommendations and how to do it well mostly comes from a US context and not a Colombian context. Even how you hire, how you communicate, how do you deal with culture and problems. And it's very much advocating to, instead of seeing creating from here as a limiting factor, seeing it as an opportunity for novelty, for nuance, for a differentiated value proposition. And I think that's so interesting because, we're all getting told like how to do things right, but from the same type of like context. But when you actually go into the ground, there's so much difference to understand. And probably the biggest learnings that I've had so far has been related to community building. So this is a picture where we have the San Francisco hub leader, Vienna, Doha, Mexico City, Munich, and we all are in like this like weird bubble of youth having different religions, different cultures, different worldviews, but we all get the message that AI should be used for the betterment of humanity. Even if when you talk about AI for good, no one really knows what good is, what good means. Mm, and humanity, I feel like we're all trying to understand what good looks like. So is it like do no harm? Is it having ethical frameworks? Is it having, I don't know, like a philosophical questions about how this works? We don't really know, but we're exploring that question, and it's like an open question invitation for everyone to participate and build that answer together. And the second one has been women in AI Colombia, because in our culture base, or I don't know, I think it's also around the world, engineering and STEM fields are dominated by men, especially. So, me having come from a social science background, but having fallen in love with technology, I felt for the longest time the biggest imposter syndrome because I was like, no, well, I'm not an engineer, so I don't really have an informed opinion on the subject. And but the deeper I got into it, I thought that that's not actually real. But there's like this dimension of like, is my voice valid? Should I actually speak up? Should I share what I think? And my conclusion so far is that yes, and that's been incredibly transformative. But for a lot of youth, we don't feel that. They don't really feel that their voice counts or that their voice matters or that they're competent enough to speak up. So I'm trying to like get and empower young people and women to take a stance, to speak up. You might say something that isn't the smartest thing in the room, but your voice matters and needs to be in the conversation. So for Latin America, we basically need four things. We need like good STEM and AI education, which startups like Platzi are offering. um, we need some more like support on like mental health and well-being programs because any school that you talk to, they'll tell you that that's their biggest challenge. And I feel that part of that issue is our relationship with social media. Thirdly is access to financial capital, entrepreneurship training, and lastly is having a digital infrastructure that is inclusive because I'm from Bogota, and when you're in a big city and you're wealthy, it's pretty much like being anywhere else around the world. But once you get out of the main cities, it's really hard to be competitive at anything, to use internet for actually learning stuff and not get consumed by like Facebook and TikTok. Mm, and I feel that throughout my work with the young AI leaders and the LATAM coalition, I've really seen how resilient and how incredibly empowered and intelligent and creative they are to move forward. So this is basically what I'll keep doing for quite some time. Um, and now I am open to any questions you guys have.
Thank you for that, Valeria. That's amazing. And like you bring up a really interesting point around mental health, right? And I guess if we're approaching the concept of compassion, like you have to actually be mentally capable and like aware to actually, feel compassion, for what you're building or the people around you. And as an anthropologist, like these are things that are part of the larger structures of a community, right? And so when you're evaluating how connected you are, to your individual self as well as to your community, you have to take these things into consideration. And so I guess just to start off the Q&A, and please, like if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A portion of the chat. But just to kind of start off on a question, I guess, with the youth that you are working with, what is it that they see mental health to be? And then also, like, what would be a way to approach or utilize AI tools in order to understand and to deliver better mental health spaces and or technology that can ultimately derive compassion?
Well, I think even before talking about mental health, the question of diversity is very, very important. So in our hub, we have all kinds of diversity, neurodiversity, and gender. And from that comes a lot of mental health concerns as well. So, oh, and also like socioeconomic diversity. So basically, things of life that you're just different set of cards that you're dealt with, but that kind of is like the basis for which the playing field is played at. Mm, so for mental health, honestly, for us has been like the most important thing is isolation and addiction. Isolation from each other because we're addicted to um, social media platforms, to online communication. So probably the biggest impact that we've had so far on mental health is just getting together, making new friendships, meeting people outside of your bubble, and coming together for a shared purpose. That has been incredibly helpful for this like microcosm of humans in Bogota. But I think that holds the key for something bigger because it's not like, oh, there's this tool, there's this agent that you plug in and you talk to it and it'll solve all your issues, right? No, it like takes a lot more work and it's a lot more demanding. And sometimes it's annoying because you got to respond to a lot of messages. So you got to show up to the meetings, you got to do some work. But my job is not to like make it easy, but to like make it meaningful. And in that meaningfulness and feeling that you have a purpose and an impact, a lot of these like mental health issues sort of like, I don't know, soothe or go on a second plane.
I love that. I love that. And I guess as a follow-up, what are some of the youth actually asking of their governments and their local leaders when it comes to, setting up the future, because the youth is very important in driving what comes next, right? And it seems like we're kind of at this cusp where we have the older generation driving the initial phases of the technology, but there's also youth that might look at this technology and utilizing it in a different way or approaching it in a different way. What are some of those conversations that you've been having, where the youth are actually talking to governments on what they want for the future?
Well, we don't normally have a seat at the table, to be honest. We kind of have to like make it ourselves and push it ourselves. And my personal experience with policymakers and law has been mostly because I was in the public sector. I worked at the Ministry of Technology and Communications, and there I was sort of close to AI governance and its international cooperation. But otherwise, you kind of have to make space for yourself. You're not automatically invited. With that being said, though, we have participated in some policy discussions with the Ministry of Science and with some senators. And basically, it's what's happening in schools now. The students, they understand the technology and they know how to use it super well. And the teachers are like trying to catch up and trying to understand how to do it, but they're like grappling at ends and it's all a mess. And it's like, oh, well, these kids are going so fast. What are we going to do? This is so complicated. We need to like, take it bit by bit, with tweezers, because this could get out of hand. They are way too powerful. So for us, it's like, oh my gosh, just get it already. This is important. And at the panel that I had with the Minister of Science, I'm telling them, like, guys, like regulating this technology is most definitely the most important activity of any democracy right now. Like, it's that important. Um, but when I'm in those discussions, it feels quite shallow. The level of depth and nuance that they can have. Mm, and the focus on the next generation is not really there. Like it's very, reactive. We're not thinking beyond the next year until the next president gets elected. But in like the future's thinking, it's like, no, we need to understand the next 10, 20, and 50 years and plan ahead for those. But we're not even there yet at all, not even close. So that's
Yeah,
concerning.
I totally agree. And one of the things, just there's a lot going on in the world right now, when it comes to, um, just kind of the segregation of thought, how like everything is kind of almost dichotomous. It's like if you believe in this tribe, then you can't believe in that tribe. And there's not a lot of cross collaboration with a lot of thoughts and ideas. Also, you're seeing a lot of like more with social media, a lot of atrocities that are going on around the world, and through these things, I just wanted to kind of get your viewpoint when you come to compassion, how are youth actually looking at being compassionate for, people and youth around the world, like as they go through, different things, within the world, how is that actually fostered? And is there a way that, and I know that there are many chapters that you work with around the world. Is there a way to like integrate that compassion into, local chapters that actually move the needle about like how do we actually become better people and better humanity, forward structures? When you're growing up in a world that's full of, wars or, people are going hungry and you're like seeing this constantly, is that something that motivates the youth to actually do something different, or does that like discourage youth, to say like, hey, you know what, there's not any possibilities, or how do we actually approach that and start to drive compassion by seeing these new ways of being, that are only open through technology?
I really love that question because I've been asking it myself quite frequently. Because what I've noticed here in the local ecosystem, and I completely understand and I think it's necessary, but the focus on AI has been mostly about economic well-being. How can you profit off of this? How can you get the next startup, the next business freeze? Can you hear me or did it freeze? Wait, you're muted.
It froze for just for a little bit, but keep
Ah,
going.
okay. All right, all right. So I actually got into like a little bit of an argument with one of the most important, like influential figures of the tech ecosystem this year because he gave this talk where he was like, people shouldn't be afraid of AI. They just need to learn how to use it and apply it to their business and make as much money as they can off of it. And I wrote to him afterwards. I'm like, listen, I think there's plenty of things to be afraid of. And it's a little ingenious or dishonest to pretend that those fears are not valid or not relevant versus just talking about them openly and going and like actually responding to them in a significant way. So I think there's like a bigger like necessity of finding like abundance, economic stability, economic growth before you can actually begin to care about a greater sense of purpose, um, care about humanity as a whole. So it's a little bit like Maslow's pyramid. And again, like it makes total sense, but I am like one of the few voices in the ecosystem that is like, hey, guys, we need to think about this more deeply, more responsibly, ethically. What we should be using this for impact. We should be using this for climate change and SDGs. But I'm definitely not the I don't know dominant voice. Yeah. So it's not the dominant discourse for sure. I'm a little bit more fringe, but I'm trying to change that.
I love that. Valeria, thank you so much for not only the work you do, but how you show up and who you are individually. And it's so important because the youth, they definitely are the voice and the future and the energy for what comes next, and as we develop these groups, compassion is something that needs to be at the forefront, right? Because if we can't get that right, then ultimately I'm afraid that there's going to be a runoff to where we're actually just copy and pasting all of the infallibilities and humanity onto a digital system. But not only that, but we're giving autonomy and direction to something that will control not only our social behavior but our individual behavior. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. I look forward to collaborating with you and your groups in the future, and I really appreciate you showing up for this global forum.
Thank you, Marcus. I really appreciate you as well. And just one last thing, with like youth inclusion at the table, it's really just about hustling and making your voice be heard. And one of the things that we recently accomplished was to get a space in a very exclusive agenda on AI safety and actually integrate the whole community. And I don't know, so if there's like influential voices here, really do keep it at the forefront that having that dimension of youth inclusion is incredibly powerful because you're also shaping and instilling that sense of purpose and responsibility onto the next generation. So I just want to leave that as a closing remark.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valeria. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.